Now we're going to handle the post method, which is completely different to the way we're doing the get method. There's a good reason. So far we've played around with it in Python and PHP, and really all we've done is change the word get for post and post for get. There's not been a lot of work to be done with the differences between the get method, get request, and the post request. Now we really have to think about what a get and what a post is. So we're going back to the theory side of the course. The get request, as you know, is passed on the URL, whereas the post method is sent. Now, I've probably mentioned before, in the body of the document. It's not actually the body of the document. It's in something called the header request. But for all intents and purposes, it's a little bit of code which is passed. You don't see the code. Nobody else can pick up the code, but it's passed to the website. It's a set of instructions instructing the web page or whatever on how to perform. And we've got to build that header. We've got to set up all the rules for communicating with the web page, including this request telling it that we need to do a post request and that the information will be inside the header. So before I begin, let's come back down to my sandbox, my folder. We've got another file called post person, which you should have created if you've been following the video series earlier on. If you haven't, then you're going to have to create this one. I'll just open it up with a text editor and stretch it out a bit so you can see it all. And it's exactly the same as the get person one that we've just used, except for the fact that we've swapped the gets for the posts. So everywhere where it was get, we've replaced it with a post. The rest of it is pretty much unchanged. And again, we're just passing in the one item, the last name. Okay, so we're not really bothered about the first name or the age. So it's the same as the get, apart from its post. It sounds fairly obvious, but actually it's quite hard to program. So if you want to copy this, that's fine. You should already have a copy. So let's get on with managing it. So first of all, we need to change the address. So instead of get person, we need to be going to post person, and we do not need the question mark because we're not passing anything on the URL, and we don't need those in there. So we're back to where we were with just a straightforward URL, and inside the headers for the URL is going to be our requests. We don't need these here. We're going to be using both of them in a little bit of a different way. The first one is this one, the actual item that we captured from the edit text. So when you typed in Smith, it was stored and we read it from here. We are going to cut that from there, and we are going to paste it as a second parameter on our execute. So when we run our async task, this string here has now got two strings attached to it, and the way we read the URL was with strings 0, and if I want to read the value that I'm sending in, I just need to change that to a 1, and that will read instead of the URL, that will read this value here, which will be the name that you type in. But we shall use that shortly and later. But that's explaining why I put that there. So I don't need this string anymore. I'm going to get rid of that. This string I'm going to come to shortly. First of all, we need some more rules. Okay. So our handshaking before was just pretty straightforward. Hello, how are you? Here's the data. Thank you very much. Now we're going to have to change the rules a little bit, because we're actually doing something. We're sending data. We're sending the surnames, the last names in the headers. So we're sending data to the file, and we're also receiving data from the file on the same stream, and we need to tell the computer or the device or whatever that's what we want to do. So there is a couple of methods. One is called set do input, because we want to do input. Normally this is set by default, that's why we didn't use it before, and we've set it to true to say that we want to have information come to us on the phone. But we also want to send information from the phone to the computer, and we're going to do that through a set do output and set that to true. So that's a little bit of handshaking. It doesn't do anything, it just tells the computer and the phone which way the data is going to go. As I said before, we didn't use it for the get person. It was just assumed to be true, and we were happy. But this time we're actually going to be sending information, so we need to explicitly mention them. The other thing we need to do is say that we're posting. So I need to tell or do the handshaking for a set request method, and I'm going to set that to post. We could do this for get as well. I don't see for any reason in our programming why we should do this for get, because we could just send our items on the URL, and we could just build the URL. We don't need to actually store things and then send them later, so we didn't really need to use the set request method to get. But we do for post. It needs to know this so that it can take the information we give it and build it into the header. The next thing I want to do is actually capture this information here, my last name equals, and the value that I've sent in. So I still need to do that. I still need to send the key value pairs. That's part of the post, and I'm just going to build a string called I say URL parameters, and I'm going to set that equal to last name equals, and don't forget to put the equal sign in, because it's still required. And what I need to do is attach this value that I sent in, which came through in the async on the string. And if you remember a couple of minutes ago, I told you that we accessed it through that value. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that here, the plus, and instead of 0, I'm going to say it's the second item on the list that I'm passing in. So now I've got my parameters set. I've done my handshaking. What I really need to do now is actually sort of send these, sort of pre-send it before I do my connection. So it's sort of building them ready for when I connect. It's just going to chuck them down to the computer and get them. So what I want is a data type called a data output stream, and I'm going to just call that send data. And what we need to do, if you remember when we did the input stream, what was happening, that bytes were coming down, and we collected the bytes and we put them into a buffer, and at some point we changed those bytes into characters. We're not really bothered about that data conversion for characters, but we still want to be able to send bytes down. So we're going to set this up, and we're going to link our connection to the stream so that we can send these bytes. So I've got my send data, so that is going to be a new data output stream, and the data output stream is going to be the connection and its get output stream. So it's all ready it knows that it's going to be sending data downstream to the computer. We've almost finished now, but as you can see, it's quite different to the GET request. So I'm going to do those bytes. I'm going to send those bytes down the stream. So if I've got my send data type, I'm going to write my bytes, and I'm going to use this one, the write bytes, which requires a string. The string that I'm going to send it is my parameters, last name equals whatever you set. So write bytes, and inside there I'm going to do the URL parameters. So that is writing the bytes into the stream. What it's really doing is I've got a boat in the stream, and I've just loaded my boat up with all the bytes, and really I need to push my boat off down the stream, and I'm going to do that in the next line. I'm going to send data, and to push the boat off down the stream I need to flush it. I'm flushing the buffer. That's what it is. There's an analogy there with flushing the toilet, which I won't go into, but it does the same sort of thing. The boat is now full of bytes, and I'm just pushing it down the river to its destination. And the last thing I want to do is, before I sort of connect to get my data, I need to close this. So there we go. So that was all of my handshaking. It's the two computers talking to one another beforehand. It's not only talking, but it's sending a little bit of information in the header to say, look, this is what's going to happen. And then it connects and it reads the data, just the same as before. So that's quite a challenging task for posting. Again, with posting and getting, at the moment we've only used just the one item, last name equals, and up here we did last name equals in the get request. We could do a little bit of string building, which I'll probably come to in the next video, on sending multiple values. But if we are sending multiple values, then I'm also going to change my activity to have several edit texts, so I can capture that information and send it. Anyway, enough talking. Time to run this to see if it works. So let's run the program. Now hopefully it should be exactly the same as the GET request. It's just a different way that we've sent the information to the computer. So I'm expecting, if I type Smith, to get back Smith's details, blogs, get back blogs details, idle, get back idle's details. If I leave it blank, I'm expecting an error message. And if I send it an incorrect name that isn't in the database, I'm expecting it to say that there's no data to be sent back. So I'm going to do those tests once it's loaded up, and it should be identical to the GET. However, as I've mentioned before, it is a vastly different way of doing it. So here we go. So if I start off with Smith and press, there we go, it's all working. I've got Smith. Let's change this one for, what did I say, blogs. Press, I've got blogs, and the other one was idle, just to make sure that the tests are the same as before. I've got idle. Now I'm going to do Jones, which should be a non-existent name. There we go, no results returned. And if I leave it blank, then I get an error message to say the value is missing. So all of this works now. That's good. Thinking back to what we did with Python, we did a few other items as well as send in multiple values. I will try to emulate what we did in Python in the device so that we're on the same level. What I am not going to do, because we've got JSON data, I am not going to sort of decode the JSON data and do anything with it. I'm going to leave that completely up to you. If you take a look at the specs for the coursework, one of the pieces of coursework that you could do is to write a JSON parser. In other words, to go through this and make some sense of it and do something with it. So obviously I'm not going to program that for you. You just copy it and send it in as your own work, and that would be a big fail. I'm happy that things are working. We've still got a fair amount of work to do with it, but we've seen just about everything. We've seen the get, we've seen the post, and we've seen a blank one. So we're heading in the right direction. Let's just stop the program and then move on.